Long before the first wheel was carved, before a single word was written, there was a time when Earth was ruled not by man, but by monsters, colossal, untamed, some with teeth longer than your forearm, others with necks like towers rising above the treetops. They walked the land, they soared through the skies, and they swam in oceans. For over 160 million years they thrived. And then, in a flash of fire, they vanished, leaving only fossils. But their story, their legacy, has never been lost. This is a lecture 65 million years in the making. Welcome to the land before time. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to a lecture 65 million years in the making. Ever since I was 3 years old, I have been obsessed with dinosaurs. They are such fascinating creatures. My parents got me many books on dinosaurs and even had a poster for them in my room. And that's where this obsession started. A couple of years later, I put the VHS tape of Jurassic Park into the machine, and my love for that franchise started. I remember binge watching those three park films every single week. When I finished Jurassic Park 3, I would put the first one back in and repeat the binge. I loved the Bayworld Museum's dinosaur exhibit so much that I even had a dino-themed party there for my 9th birthday. And over the years, we went to various other museums, including Grahamstown and Cape Town, where I just had to recreate Owen Grady from Jurassic World's pose with his Velociraptor Blue. Now, skip a few years. In 2015, we saw the release of Jurassic World. And I will forever brag about this, but I became the first child to watch a movie on the IMAX screen at Bay West during the Jurassic World Blue Carpet premiere. That's a basic summary of how I came to be introduced to dinosaurs. We'll kick things off by looking at where dinosaurs came from, what their names actually mean, what the world looked like before they showed up, and how they became the undisputed landlords of planet Earth for over 160 million years. Then I'll introduce you to some of my personal prehistoric favorites, from marine reptiles like the Plesiosaurus to flying reptiles like the pterodactyl, and of course to the land-based legends like the Tyrannosaurus rex, Velociraptor, and the Brachiosaurus. Spoiler: not all of them are as Hollywood makes them out to be. I'm looking at you, Jurassic World Velociraptor. We'll also talk about paleontology, the science behind how we know any of this in the first place. We'll cover some of the most famous fossil finds, the painstaking process of digging up bones, and even a few dinosaurs that were discovered right here in South Africa. Now, where does the name come from? The word dinosaur was invented in 1842 by Sir Richard Owen, a British scientist who, frankly, was looking for a catchy label for a bunch of giant fossilized reptiles that didn't quite fit into the big lizard category. He went with the Greek words deinos, meaning terrible or fearfully great, and sauros, meaning lizard. So yes, dinosaur literally means terrible lizard. And Owen came up with the name after grouping together three already discovered species. The megalosaur, the first discovered dinosaur, the iguanodon, made famous in Disney's Dinosaur, and finally, Haliosaurus. Of course, naming dinosaurs didn't stop there. Since then, scientists have been on a roll, mixing Greek, Latin, geography, and the occasional tribute to a famous person. That's why we've got classics like Tyrannosaurus rex or Tyrant Lizard King, Dracorex hogwartsia, yes, literally Dragon King of Hogwarts, and Masiakasaurus or Vicious Lizard. When we talk about the age of dinosaurs, we're actually talking about Mesozoic era, which ran for roughly 186 million years. The Mesozoic is split into three main periods: the Triassic, Jurassic, and Cretaceous, each with its own climate, geography, and cast of prehistoric characters. First up, we have the Triassic period, which lasted from 252 to 201 million years ago. The Triassic begins in the shadow of the Permian-Triassic mass extinction, the worst extinction event in Earth's history. Around 90% of all life on the planet vanished. Oceans went nearly empty and forests completely collapsed. The landmass of Pangaea was still intact, stretching from pole to pole. That meant vast deserts in the interior and extreme weather everywhere else. Early dinosaurs like the Evoraptor and Herrerasaurus were small, lightweight, and fast, not the hulking giants we think of today. Picture them more like speedy, upright reptiles with big ambitions. But dinosaurs weren't the top dogs yet. They had serious competition from other archosaurs, including some massive crocodile-like predators. The Triassic was more about surviving than dominating, until nature decided to reshuffle the deck. Around 201 million years ago, another extinction event hit, wiping out many of the dinosaurs' competitors and handing them the keys to the kingdom. Next up, we had the Jurassic period from 201 to 145 million years ago. The Jurassic period is when dinosaurs truly took over. Pangaea started breaking apart, creating lush coastlines, wetter climates, and giant fern forests. Basically, an all-you-can-eat buffet for plant eaters. And plant eaters took full advantage. This is the age of the sauropods, the Brachiosaurus, the Diplodocus, and the Apatosaurus, herbivore skyscrapers with necks long enough to see over most small hills. And of course, where there are giant herbivores, there are giant predators trying to eat them. Enter Allosaurus, not as big as the T-Rex, but just as dangerous in its own time. The Jurassic sky saw early bird ancestors like Archaeopteryx, while the ocean was ruled by marine reptiles like Plesiosaur and Ichthyosaurus. Proof that the Jurassic period wasn't just a land-based dino monopoly, it was a full ecosystem takeover. By the end of the Jurassic, dinosaurs were the unquestioned rulers of the earth, and they weren't just surviving, they were experimenting with wild evolutionary designs. And lastly, we have the Cretaceous period, which lasted from 145 to 66 million years ago. The Cretaceous was the dinosaurs' golden age, and their last hurrah. Continents drifted closer to where they are today, sea levels were high and warm, humid climates dominated, and this was the first time flowering plants appeared, changing diets and landscapes forever. Dinosaur diversity exploded. In North America, you had horned giants like Triceratops, walking tanks like Ankylosaurus, and of course the apex predator Tyrannosaurus rex, who could bite through bones. In Mongolia's deserts, Velociraptor hunted with sickle-shaped claws, and in South America, the sail-backed Spinosaurus hunted in rivers like a prehistoric crocodile crossed with a fishing boat. The Cretaceous period also saw a peak era for why did nature do that, dinosaurs? Parasaurolophus, with its enormous head crest that probably worked like a built-in trumpet, Pachycephalosaurus with a domed skull thicker than most medieval helmets, and Therizinosaurus, a giant clawed leaf-eating weirdo that looked like it was invented by accident. But no matter how successful they were, the clock was ticking. Around 66 million years ago, an asteroid roughly the size of a city slammed into what's now known as the Yucatan Peninsula in Mexico. The result? Massive fire, global cooling, and an extinction event that ended the reign of the dinosaurs. In short, the Triassic period, the dinosaurs were started small, hustled hard, and survived two extinction events. The Jurassic period, where they got huge, took over the world and launched a few flying prototypes. And then finally, your Cretaceous was peak diversity, peak weirdness, and a dramatic finale courtesy of an asteroid. With the stage now set, the dinosaurs were ready to take over the Mesozoic world. They spread across continents, adapted into countless shapes and sizes, and evolved into some of the most remarkable creatures ever to walk, swim, or fly. And while the sheer diversity of life in their time is staggering, there are a few species, dinosaurs and non-dinosaurs alike, that stand out to me. So let's dive in, literally, with one of the ocean's most graceful hunters, the Plesiosaurus. If you've ever seen a drawing of the Loch Ness monster Nessie, you've basically met the Plesiosaurus. This marine reptile, which lived during the early Jurassic about 200 million years ago, wasn't actually a dinosaur, but it shared their reign in the Mesozoic world. Its body was a masterpiece of aquatic engineering, a broad turtle-like torso, four large flippers for propulsion, and the unmistakable long neck, which could be up to half its total body length. This neck, supported by dozens of elongated vertebrae, wasn't a rubbery swan-like thing you see in old movies. It was flexible enough to sweep sideways and downwards in a quick strike, but not capable of extreme curling or coiling. Scientists think it was used for stealth hunting, sneaking the head close to unsuspecting prey before snapping its jaw shut on fish, squid, and other small marine animals. Fossil evidence suggests Plesiosaurus was a common inhabitant of the shallow seas that covered much of Europe during the Jurassic period. Its remains are often found in limestone deposits that were once warm coastal waters teeming with life. While it wasn't the top predator of its environment, it was a highly effective hunter in its own right. Today, Plesiosaurus lives on more in myth than in science, thanks to its enduring association with legends like Nessie the Loch Ness Monster. But in its time, it was a sleek, capable predator, a silent, four-flippered assassin patrolling the ancient seas. The pterodactyl is one of the prehistoric creatures that Hollywood has cheerfully rolled into the dinosaur category. But technically it wasn't a dinosaur at all. It was a pterosaur, a flying reptile, and it ruled the skies during the late Jurassic period, around 150 million years ago. If dinosaurs were the lords of the land and the mosasaur the tyrant of the sea, pterodactyls were the aerial patrol gliding over coastlines and rivers in search of their next meal. In reality, pterodactyl is often used as a catch-all term, but the correct name for the classic long-beaked, short-tailed flyer is Pterodactylus. These creatures weren't all enormous dragon-sized monsters. Most were surprisingly modest in size, with wingspans of about 1.5 meters. That still made them larger than most modern birds, but they wouldn't be snatching people off beaches the way some films suggest. The anatomy was a marvel of lightweight engineering. The wings were made of thin membrane of skin, muscle, and blood vessels stretching from the elongated fourth finger down to the ankles. The bones were hollow and reinforced, keeping the body light but strong enough for powerful flapping and long glides. Their skulls were elongated, with jaws lined with small conical teeth perfect for gripping fish or snapping up small animals and insects. Pterodactyls were likely excellent gliders, using air currents to soar over large distances without expending much energy. They probably hunted like modern seabirds, swooping down to catch prey from the water surfaces or plucking small creatures off sandbanks. While they weren't the largest pterosaurs by a long shot, that title goes to giants like Quetzalcoatl. Pterodactylus holds a special place in paleontological history. Its discovery in the early 19th century was one of the first solid pieces of evidence that reptiles could take the air, challenging scientists' belief of what prehistoric life could be. Now, if your only knowledge of the Dilophosaurus comes from Jurassic Park, we need to clear a few things up. In the film, it was portrayed as a small, venom-spitting dinosaur with a flashy neck frill and the unsettling habit of blinding its victims before eating them. In reality, none of that is true, except the eating part. The real Dilophosaurus was a far more impressive animal, and it didn't need cheap frills or Hollywood venom to be dangerous. Dilophosaurus lived in the early Jurassic period around 193 million years ago, making it one of the earliest large theropods. At over 6 meters long and standing nearly 2 meters tall at the hip, it was a fast, lightly built predator. Its most distinctive feature, and the one that inspired its name, which means two-crested lizard, was a pair of thin curved crests running along the top of its skull. These weren't horns for fighting, they were too fragile for combat. Instead, they were likely for display, possibly to attract mates or signal to others of its kind. Its skull was long and narrow, with a mouth full of serrated teeth perfect for slicing through flesh. The jaw structure suggests that it may not have had the bone-crushing bite of later predators like Tyrannosaurus, but that didn't make it harmless. Evidence from its anatomy indicates that the Dilophosaurus was a fast runner capable of chasing down prey or scavenging carcasses. It may have targeted smaller dinosaurs, early mammals, and anything else it could overpower. One particularly interesting discovery about Dilophosaurus is that its forelimbs were strong and equipped with clawed hands. This means it may have used its arms to grab and hold struggling prey before delivering the killing bite, a hunting strategy more active and versatile than some of its later theropod cousins. Fossils have been discovered primarily in what is now the southwestern United States, an area that in the early Jurassic was the landscape of rivers, floodplains, and seasonal lakes. It would have been a rich hunting ground, and Dilophosaurus was perfectly adapted to take advantage of it. So no venom, no frills, just a sleek, fast, and deadly predator armed with crests that made it one of the most recognizable dinosaurs of its time. If anything, the real Dilophosaurus didn't need Hollywood gimmicks. It was actually cool enough on its own. And here it is, the rock star, the headliner, the one dinosaur that even people who couldn't tell a Triceratops from a toaster can name. Tyrannosaurus rex. Its very name translates to Tyrant Lizard King, and let's be honest, that might be the most metal name ever given to an animal. The T-Rex lived during the late Cretaceous about 68 to 66 million years ago, right at the tail end of the dinosaur era. It was one of the last and largest predator dinosaurs to ever walk the earth. Stretching up to 12 meters in length and weighing around 9 tons, it was basically a living tank on legs. Unlike some earlier carnivores that were lean and fast, T-Rex was built like a bulldozer, massive skull, bone-crushing jaw, and muscles that made it both powerful and terrifyingly efficient. Its bite was its most famous weapon, with teeth the size of bananas, serrated like steak knives. T-Rex could deliver the strongest bite force of any land animal in history. enough to crush through bone as easily as we bite into an apple. Fossil evidence even shows healed bite marks on the bones of other dinosaurs, proving it could chew through skeletons and keep going. When T-Rex bit something, it stayed bitten. But what about those tiny arms? They've been in the butt of jokes for decades, but recent studies suggest that they weren't as useless as people think. They were short, yes, but extremely strong and may have been used to help grip prey, assist in getting up from the ground, or even holding onto mates during, shall we say, more personal moments. So while T-Rex's arms were not its main weapons, they weren't just comic relief either. T-Rex was also smarter than it's often given credit for. It had relatively large brain for a dinosaur, excellent eyesight, and a keen sense of smell, making it a skilled hunter as well as a potential scavenger. In fact, scientists now think it did both, chasing down prey when the opportunity arose, but also happily feasting on carcasses when available. After all, why waste energy when dinner is already dead? Living in what is now North America, T-Rex shared its world with horned dinosaurs like Triceratops and duck-billed hadrosaurs, which would have been both competition and food. It was an apex predator at the top of the food chain, and nothing on land posed a serious threat to it, except of course the asteroid that ended the Cretaceous and wiped out non-avian dinosaurs altogether. Today, the T-Rex is more than just a fossil. It's a cultural icon starring in countless films, books, and documentaries. From Rexy terrifying kids in Jurassic Park to stomping through cartoons and video games, the Tyrant Lizard King continues to rule popular imagination as the ultimate predator. If the T-Rex is the king of the dinosaurs, then the Spinosaurus is the strange rival king from a neighboring kingdom. The one who shows up at the feast looking bizarre but undeniably impressive. Living around 100 to 93 million years ago during the mid-Cretaceous, Spinosaurus was one of the largest predatory dinosaurs ever discovered, possibly even longer than T-Rex at up to 15 meters from nose to tail. But while the T-Rex was a land-based powerhouse, Spinosaurus took a very different evolutionary path. It became a semi-aquatic monster of the rivers. Spinosaurus is instantly recognizable thanks to the enormous sail on its back, formed by elongated spines that stuck out of its vertebrae, some over 1.5 meters long. Scientists still debate its purpose. Was it for display, a way to impress mates or intimidate rivals? Was it a thermal regulator helping the animal absorb or release heat like a giant solar panel? Or was it simply evolutionary overkill because why not add a dramatic fin if you're already 15 meters long? Now, whatever the reason, the sail made Spinosaurus one of the most visually striking dinosaurs ever. Its skull was long, narrow, and filled with conical teeth, more like a crocodile's snout than T-Rex's bone-crushing jaws. This design was perfect for catching slippery prey like fish, which made up a large part of its diet. Fossil evidence suggests Spinosaurus spent much of its time in rivers and swamps, swimming with the help of its paddle-like tail. In fact, recent discoveries have shown its tail was broader and more flexible than we once thought, allowing it to move through water with surprising efficiency. Imagine a dinosaur with the body plan of a heron, the jaw of a crocodile, and the tail of a giant newt, and you've got a Spinosaurus. Unlike T-Rex, which was built for brute force and domination on land, Spinosaurus occupied a completely different ecological niche. It was the top predator of aquatic environments in North America, patrolling ancient river systems where it likely ambushed giant fish, sharks, and even smaller dinosaurs that wandered too close to the water's edge. Despite its size, Spinosaurus has been a puzzle for paleontologists for decades. Fossil remains are fragmentary, and much of our image of the animal has been pieced together slowly, sometimes with dramatic changes. Early reconstructions showed it as a typical land predator with a weird sail. Now, after new discoveries in Morocco, we understand it as the world's first known semi-aquatic dinosaurs, overturning decades of assumptions about what dinosaurs were capable of. If the T-Rex is the classic Hollywood superstar, Spinosaurus is the avant-garde artist, strange, experimental, and utterly unforgettable. It may not have the same cultural fame, but in terms of uniqueness, the Spinosaurus might be the most extraordinary predator the Mesozoic ever produced. Thanks to Jurassic Park, Velociraptor is one of the most famous dinosaurs of all time. Unfortunately, the movie version is about as accurate as calling a chihuahua a wolf. The film portrayed the raptors as man-sized, scaly, pack-hunting supervillains with door-opening skills. The real Velociraptor? Still dangerous, still fascinating, but much smaller and feathered. Velociraptors lived during the late Cretaceous around 75 to 71 million years ago in what is now Mongolia. At about 2 meters long and less than a meter tall at the hip, it was closer in size to a large turkey than a human. But before you breathe a sigh of relief, remember this was a turkey with sickle-shaped killing claws and the attitude of a chainsaw. Its most iconic weapon was the enlarged claw on each foot, curved like a scythe and up to 6.5 centimeters long. Raptors likely used these claws to pin down prey, leaping onto their victims and slashing or gripping while delivering fatal bites with their sharp, serrated teeth. Their build suggests they were agile, fast runners, perfect for ambushes and quick takedowns rather than prolonged chases. Velociraptor's skulls was long and narrow and filled with around 80 sharp teeth. It also had a relatively large brain for its size, suggesting about average intelligence compared to many other dinosaurs. This has fueled the popular image of raptors as cunning hunters, possibly working together in packs. While there's no direct evidence for pack hunting, the idea isn't completely far-fetched. Modern birds of prey and wolves show that cooperative strategies can evolve when brains and claws come together. The biggest shock for many is feathers. Fossil impressions have revealed that Velociraptors had quill knobs on its forearm bones, proof it sported feathers. These wouldn't have been for flight, raptors were too heavy for that, but likely for insulation and display. Imagine a sleek, feathered predator with a deadly foot claw prowling the deserts of Cretaceous Mongolia, much scarier than the scaly reptiles Hollywood served us. So Velociraptor wasn't the human-sized monster that Spielberg made famous. The reality is still terrifying. It was a feathered assassin, fast, agile, and armed with sickle claws. If the predators were the villains of the dinosaur world, then Brachiosaurus was the gentle giant, the skyscraper on legs that calmly reached for the treetops while everyone else argued over scraps on the ground. Living during the late Jurassic around 154 to 150 million years ago, Brachiosaurus was one of the largest dinosaurs of its time. Estimates suggest that it could grow up to 25 meters long and weigh as much as 50 metric tons. That's about the size of a modern blue whale, except this one was doing it all on land. Brachiosaurus had a very distinctive body plan compared to other sauropods. Most long-necked dinosaurs had their necks stretched out horizontally, balanced by equally long tails. The Brachiosaurus, however, was built differently. Its front legs were longer than its hind legs, giving its body an upward tilt and holding its neck almost like a giraffe's. This posture meant it could browse from the very tops of trees, reaching vegetation that other herbivores couldn't touch. In a world where competition for food was fierce, Brachiosaurus had a private buffet waiting in the canopy. Its neck alone could reach over 9 meters in length, supported by an intricate system of air sacs and lightweight vertebrae that made the enormous structure manageable. This adaptation not only helped with feeding, but also with breathing, as the air sac system made it more efficient for such a colossal animal to get oxygen circulating through its body. Despite its size, Brachiosaurus wasn't invincible. Fossil evidence suggests it lived in herds or at least in groups which would have offered protection against predators like Allosaurus. Even so, a full-grown adult would have been nearly untouchable, too big, too tall, and too heavy for most predators to risk attacking. Juveniles, on the other hand, would have been far more vulnerable until they reached their gigantic adult size. One of the most famous appearances of Brachiosaurus was in Jurassic Park, where it was the first dinosaur revealed on screen. That moment when it calmly reared up to eat from the treetops while John Williams' score soared captured exactly what made Brachiosaurus special. It wasn't terrifying, it wasn't aggressive, it was awe-inspiring. If dinosaurs had jousting tournaments, Triceratops would have been the undefeated champion. Living during the late Cretaceous, about 68 to 66 million years ago, this three-horned herbivore was one of the last and most iconic dinosaurs to evolve before the asteroid brought the curtain down. At around 9 meters long and weighing between 6 and 12 tons, Triceratops was basically a walking tank, equal parts elegance and brute force. Its most distinctive features, of course, were the three horns, two long ones above the eyes and a shorter one on the nose. These horns, combined with its massive bony frill, gave Triceratops a look so intimidating that even apex predators like Tyrannosaurus rex had to think twice. Fossil evidence actually showed heel bite marks on Triceratops skulls, suggesting it sometimes survived attacks from the T-Rex. The frills itself has sparked endless debates. Some paleontologists think it was primarily defensive, protecting the neck and shoulders from bites. Others argue it was more about display. Triceratops may have used it to attract mates, intimidate rivals, or signal within the herd. The truth could well be both. Protection first, but with a little style thrown in for good measure. After all, even tanks look better with custom paint. Despite its armor and horns, Triceratops wasn't a predator. It was a dedicated herbivore. With a beak at the front of its mouth and rows of teeth further back, it was well adapted for cropping and grinding through tough plants like ferns, cycads, and palms. In fact, its teeth formed what's called a dental battery, hundreds of teeth stacked in rows constantly replaced throughout its life. That meant it could chew through vegetation with the efficiency of a prehistoric lawnmower. Triceratops fossils are among the most common dinosaur remains found in North America, particularly in the Hell Creek Formation, which has given us a vivid picture of the very end of the dinosaur age. They likely lived in herds or at least family groups with horn frills and playing a key role in social interaction. Today, the Triceratops is second only to T-Rex in dinosaur popularity. Children recognize it instantly, toy companies love it, and museums display it proudly. It's the perfect blend of power and character. Now it's time for all the boring nonsense. Paleontology is often confused with archaeology, so let's clear it up first. Archaeologists study human history and culture, ancient cities, tools, bones, and artifacts left behind by people. Paleontologists, on the other hand, go much further back in time. Their work is the study of life itself, fossils of plants, animals, and ecosystems stretching back hundreds of millions of years. If archaeology is about understanding us, paleontology is about understanding everything that came before us. The word paleontology comes from the Greek paleos, or ancient, ontos, being, and logos, study. Quite literally, it is the study of ancient life, and that ancient life reveals itself in fossils, remains preserved in stone, often formed when minerals slowly replace bone, shell, or wood over millions of years. These time capsules don't just give us skeletons, they give us a window into entire worlds that no human eye has ever seen. The foundation of paleontology as a science began in the late 18th and early 19th centuries, though fossils had been discovered long before that. In medieval times, large fossilized bones were often interpreted as the remains of giants, dragons, or biblical creatures. It wasn't until the Enlightenment, when naturalists began to study these bones scientifically, that a clearer picture started to form. One of the earliest pioneers was Georges Cuvier, a French naturalist in the late 1700s. He compared fossil bones to living species and realized that many belonged to creatures that no longer existed. This was radical at the time. It was the birth of the concept of extinction. Imagine the shock. The Earth hadn't just always looked that way, it does now. Entire species could vanish forever. Then came the 19th century, when fossil hunting really took off. In England, Mary Anning, a self-taught fossil collector from Lyme Regis, made some of the most important early discoveries, including the first complete ichthyosaur and plesiosaur skeletons. Despite living in poverty and being largely overlooked by a scientific establishment of her time, Anning's findings revolutionized the field and earned her a quiet but lasting place in history as the mother of paleontology. It was also in the 19th century that Richard Owen, another British scientist, coined the term Dinosauria in 1842, giving these terrible lizards their name and establishing them as a distinct group of reptiles. Owen's work helped spark the world's fascination with dinosaurs, a fascination that continues to this day. As the science developed, paleontology began to answer bigger questions. How do fossils form? Why do they tell us about evolution? How do we reconstruct ecosystems from skeletons and stone? Today, paleontology isn't just about digging up bones, it's about piecing together the history of life on Earth, from microscopic bacteria to towering sauropods. Modern techniques have pushed the field even further. High-powered CT scans let scientists look inside fossils without breaking them apart. Isotope analysis reveals what dinosaurs ate and how they grew. Even the colors of some dinosaurs have been reconstructed by studying microscopic structures on fossilized feathers. In short, paleontology has gone from digging up bones to reconstructing entire worlds astonishing detail. At its core, though, paleontology remains a blend of science and imagination. Every fossil is like a puzzle piece, and with each discovery, we get closer to understanding the grand picture of life's history. The history of paleontology isn't just about bones and rock. It's also about drama, rivalries, and discoveries that reshaped how we see the world. One of the most colorful chapters in this history was the infamous Bone Wars of the late 19th century. Two American paleontologists, Othniel Charles Marsh and Edward Drinker Cope, became locked in a bitter rivalry to outdiscover each other. Their feud was so intense they would sabotage digs, bribe workers, and even accuse each other of destroying fossils. The competition was ruthless, but it yielded astonishing results. Between them, they discovered and described over 130 new species, including the Stegosaurus, Triceratops, and Allosaurus. Another milestone was the discovery of the Archaeopteryx in Germany in 1861. With both feathers and teeth, claws and wings, it was a clear link between dinosaurs and birds. This single fossil helped cement Charles Darwin's then controversial theory of evolution, showing the world that species could transform over time. To this day, the Archaeopteryx remains one of the most iconic fossils ever found. Then there are particularly spectacular skeletons that captured public imagination. Perhaps the most famous is the Sioux T. Rex skeleton, unearthed in South Dakota in 1990. At over 90% complete, Sioux is the most complete Tyrannosaurus Rex skeleton ever found, and her display at the Field Museum in Chicago draws millions of visitors each year. Finally, in Mongolia, paleontologists discovered something equally groundbreaking: the Velociraptor fossil preserved in nest even amid battle. One fossil famously shows a velociraptor locked in combat with a protoceratops, the two creatures frozen in time by a sudden sandstorm. When most people think of dinosaurs, their minds jump straight to North America. Yet South Africa is quietly one of the most important places in the world for understanding dinosaur history. In fact, the country preserves some of the earliest chapters in the age of dinosaurs, making it a cradle of dinosaur evolution rather than just a side note. The heart of this story lies in the Karoo Basin, a massive geological formation covering much of central South Africa. Stretching over 400,000 square kilometers, the Karoo is a treasure trove of fossils, preserving a nearly continuous record of life from about 300 to 180 million years ago. That means it captures the world before the dinosaurs, the rise of the first true dinosaurs, and the establishment as the dominant land animals of the Jurassic period. The uppermost layers of the Karoo, particularly the Elliott Formation and Clarence Formation, are where the dinosaur story takes central stage. These rock layers date back to the late Triassic and early Jurassic period. At this time, the supercontinent of Pangaea was still largely intact, and what is now South Africa lay closer to the southernmost pole. The environment was dry and seasonal, with rivers, floodplains, and stretches of desert-like terrain. Despite these tough conditions, dinosaurs flourished. Even more fascinating are the trace fossils preserved in South Africa, the footprints and trackways that dinosaurs left behind. Unlike bones, which show us anatomy, footprints give us behaviors. In the Western Cape and across parts of the Karoo, trackways dating back 140 to 183 million years ago have been found. Some record herds of herbivores traveling together, hinting at social behaviors, and others show strides of theropods revealing how fast they could run. One extraordinary set of footprints, dubbed the Firewalkers of the Karoo, were found preserved between volcanic lava flows, capturing dinosaurs moving across a landscape still recovering from massive eruptions. These trackways are time-stamped evidence of life in motion, frozen for eternity. In the early 1900s, in the small town of Dispatch, workers in a brick quarry made a discovery that would become a milestone in South African paleontology. As they cut through layers of stone, they unearthed massive fossilized bones. At the time, the workers had no idea what they were looking at. To them, the bones were just an obstacle, and many were destroyed or even built into bricks and walls. The bones were eventually studied by Robert Broom, a Scottish-born paleontologist. In 1904, he named the new animal Algoasaurus boweri. The name means Algoa lizard, a reference to Algoa Bay, with the species name honoring the anatomist George Bower. The description was based on only a few bones, part of a shoulder blade, ribs, vertebrae, and a femur, but it was enough to show that this animal belonged to the sauropods. Only a handful of pieces were saved, and it was from these fragments that scientists would identify one of South Africa's first dinosaurs. Algoasaurus itself would have been an impressive sight, even if not quite on the scale of the later giants like Argentinosaurus. It was probably around 9 to 10 meters long, with a long neck for browsing vegetation, a solid body supported by pillar-like legs, and a sweeping tail. Its teeth, like those of other sauropods, would have been simple and peg-shaped, designed for stripping leaves rather than chewing. It lived during the early Cretaceous about 140 million years ago, when South Africa was still part of the great southern landmass of Gondwana. The landscape then was very different from the semi-arid Karoo we know today. Rivers wound through forests of ferns, cycads, and conifers, and early flowering plants were just beginning to appear. Algoasaurus would have moved slowly through environments, feeding high and low, and likely had to watch out for predators among the theropods of its day. Because the remains were so incomplete, scientists have long debated exactly where Algoasaurus belongs on the sauropod family tree. Some have suggested it was an early relative of the titanosaurs, a group that would later dominate the southern continents. Others place it among more primitive lineages, closer to dinosaurs like Camarasaurus. And the frustrating truth is that without more material, we may never know for sure. What we do know is that Algosaurus stands as one of the oldest recognized dinosaurs from Africa and one of the first to be formally described in South Africa. If South Africa has a signature dinosaur, it's the Massospondylus. It isn't the biggest or the scariest, but it's the one that tells us the most about where dinosaurs came from, how they lived, and even how they raised their young. In many ways, Massospondylus is the key to understanding the dawn of the giants. The first fossils were described as far back as 1854, which makes Massospondylus one of the earliest dinosaurs to ever receive a name. The name means massive vertebrae, and that was because the bones that were dug out of the Karoo seemed unusually large compared to anything else at the time. Those bones came from the rocks of the Elliott Formation, layers of sandstone and mudstone laid down about 200 million years ago in the Jurassic period. Back then, South Africa wasn't the dry, scrubby land we see today. It was a place of floodplains and rivers mixed with stretches of arid desert. A tough landscape, but one where Massospondylus clearly thrived because its fossils are found everywhere. It wasn't huge, not compared to what came later, maybe 4 to 6 meters long, about the size of a small bus, but it was one of the first really successful plant-eating dinosaurs. It had a fairly long neck, a long balancing tail, and a body built somewhere between two-legged runner and four-legged browser. Most of the time, it probably walked on two legs, but it had strong forearms with claws that could have helped it grab plants or pull itself onto all fours if it needed to. Its teeth were simple, leaf-shaped blades, perfect for stripping leaves or ferns and cycads. What makes Massospondylus so remarkable, though, is not just the skeleton we found, but the glimpses we've had into its life cycle. In the 1970s, paleontologists discovered a clutch of eggs in the Golden Gate Highlands National Park. Inside those eggs were some of the best preserved dinosaur embryos ever found. These were Massospondylus's babies, frozen in time before they had even hatched. The embryos showed us something extraordinary. The young looked completely different from the adults. They had big heads, short necks, and stubby little limbs. As they grew, their bodies changed dramatically. Necks lengthened, proportions shifted, and it was one of the first real pieces of evidence of how dinosaurs grew and developed over time. Those eggs also told another story. They weren't scattered randomly, they were laid in a nest. And these weren't just one nest, these were many in all the same area. This suggests that Massospondylus returned to the same nesting grounds year after year, like modern birds and turtles. Now, the Euskalosaurus doesn't get the same attention as Massospondylus, but it deserves a place in the story because it represents the next step in the evolution of South Africa's early plant eaters. Where Massospondylus was sturdy but modest in size, Euskalosaurus was big, much bigger. In fact, it's considered one of the largest dinosaurs of the late Triassic, long before the Brachiosaurus and Diplodocus appeared on the scene. The name means well-built lizard, which is fitting because the Aeschylosaurus could reach up to 10 meters in length, making it a giant compared to its contemporaries. Its bones were thick and heavy, its limbs strong and weight-bearing, and its body much more robust than earlier sauropodomorphs. Where Massospondylus could still rear up on two legs if it wanted, Euskalosaurus was edging closer to being a full-time quadruped, walking on all fours like the later sauropods. You can also see the transition happening in its skeleton. The long neck getting longer, the body getting bulkier, and the legs taking more of the load. Its diet would have been entirely herbivorous, browsing on the tough herbivorous plants of the Triassic. Cycads, seed ferns, and horsetails would have made up much of its menu, and its peg-like teeth were well suited for stripping and swallowing large amounts of foliage. Later sauropods, it probably relied on sheer volume, eating constantly to fuel its large body, rather than chewing and processing food in detail. What's interesting is that Euskalosaurus, like Algosaurus, is known from incomplete material. For decades, it was a bit of a taxonomic puzzle, with some scientists questioning whether it was actually a dinosaur at all. But the bones we do have, especially the massive limb bones and vertebrae, show enough distinctive features to make it stand at its own genus. These same bones also give us a sense of just how heavy and powerful it was. That's what I love about this story. Dinosaurs aren't just museum skeletons or CGI monsters. They were alive, breathing, walking, eating, raising young, right here in the same land we stand on today. When you look out across the Karoo today and see endless plains under the sky, it's hard to imagine. But 200 million years ago, those plains echoed with herds moving across the mud, with tiny hatchlings breaking from their shells, with predators leaving their footprint in soft grounds that hardened into stone. That's not science fiction. That happened. So when you leave tonight and somebody asks you about dinosaurs, don't just say Jurassic Park. Tell them about South Africa. Tell them about the Karoo, about the fossils under our feet, about the tiny legs that tell us how dinosaurs grew up. Tell them that this place was one of the cradles of the age of dinosaurs. And that, for me, is the magic of it all. Dinosaurs may be gone, but they're not really gone. They're still here, in the birds overhead, in the rocks beneath us, in the story we tell. All we have to do is look closely enough to see them. So to finish where we began, this has been a lecture 65 million years in the making, and thank you for coming with me into the land before time.
Before the roads, before the flame, before the world had learned a name, they ruled the land with silent pride and moved like thunder far and wide. The rivers bent beneath their weight, the wind would shift, the trees would shake, their shadows danced on canyon walls and echoed through the ancient calls. They left and cooled by flames, we find their bones and hold our breath in awe of life that danced with death. Monsters not all fought, some just lived and some were caught. Now every bird that rides the sky reminds the world you did not die. Where giants walk, the ground still sings of beating hearts and thunder wings. Through time and stone and fossil dust, we speak their names because we must. Oh, dinosaurs, though time moved on, your shadow has not truly gone. The fire came, the skies turned black, but still you leave a silent track. Through stone, through time, through blood, through flame, the world still whispers out your name. Where giants walk, the ground still sings